Hello and welcome to the Colorado Real Estate Harder Questions to help you pass your exam. Question 1. If you have an exclusive right to sell listing contract, A, you agree to work exclusively with the seller and no others at the same time. B, you cannot work with buyers who might be interested in the seller's property. C, you must sell the seller's property to comply with the agreement. D, you must have permission to work with other sellers at the same time. Answer D, you have permission to work with other sellers at the same time. Exclusive means that you are the only broker listing this property, not that you are the only working exclusively with the seller. Question 2. Following a foreclosure sale, the lender receives the A. Entire proceeds for the sale, including any excess above the debit. B. Proceeds of the sale up to the outstanding debit plus court and collection costs. C. Uncollected loan balance only. D. Property since it was the collateral for the loan. The answer is B. Proceeds of the sale up to the outstanding debit plus court and collection costs. Question 3. After a property inspection, a buyer may A. Require the seller to repair all unsatisfactory items. B. List neighborhood features which are unsatisfactory. C. Terminate the contract without listing specific defects. D. Require the seller to provide cash credit at closing for defects. The answer is C. Terminate the contract without listing specific defects. The contract to buy and sell and the notice to inspect allow for the buyer just to terminate without explanation. The other option available to the buyer is to ask the seller to make certain repairs. Question 4. Which of the following is exempt from the real estate licensing law in Colorado? A. An attorney at law who lists a client's house for sale for 6% sales commission. B. A son selling his father's property under a proper power of attorney and receiving a fee of 3% of the selling price. C. An investor who owns more than 10 houses and sells 3 of them to a private individual. D. An inactive licensee helping a coworker fill out a purchase offer on a for sale by owner property and not collecting a fee. The answer is C. An investor who owns more than 10 houses and sells 3 of them to a private individual. The investor is a for sale by owner. You can negotiate on your own behalf and be exempt from licensing. Question 5. The buyer has sent the seller an inspection notice with several unsatisfactory items that the seller refuses to correct. If the issue is not resolved by the resolution deadline, A. The contract will terminate at the resolution deadline. B. Buyer has 1 day after the resolution deadline to withdraw the notice. C. Seller may be charged for these items at closing. D. Seller may terminate the contract at the resolution deadline. The answer is B. Buyer has 1 day after the resolution deadline to withdraw the notice. The buyer can waive the right to inspection requirements and continue with the contract. Question 6. An investor asks you to assist in arranging a tax-deferred exchange for her property. You should advise her, A. You cannot do this because there are no approved forms. B. You have a form for only a delayed non-simultaneous exchange. C. There is a form which can be altered to cover any exchange. D. You can assist with the real estate matters and her attorney and accountant can help with the rest. Answer is D. You can assist with the real estate matters and her attorney and accountant can help with the rest. Seven. The closing instructions form CLB-9-95 A. May be used only by the title insurance companies. B. Must be part of every contract. C. Provides for the closing company to give legal advice to the listing broker. D. Engages a closing service on behalf of the buyer and seller. The answer is D. Engages a closing service on behalf of the buyer and seller. The closing service must have an agreement which allows the closing service to provide its services for the seller and buyer. Question 8. The HUD pamphlet, Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home, must be provided to buyers of pre-1978 residences by A. HUD, B. Lender, C. The broker, D. The seller. The answer is D. The seller. The pamphlet is almost always given to the buyer by the broker or the lender, but for test purposes, it is the seller's responsibility to provide this pamphlet to the buyer. Question 9. A broker moves his office to the building next door and neglects to inform the Real Estate Commission. What is the status of the brokerage license? A. The license is revoked. B. The license is canceled and only the employed licensees may conduct business. C. The license is unaffected as long as the broker informs the Commission within 30 days. D. The license is inactive along with the licenses of employed licensees. The answer is D. The license is inactive along with the licenses of employed licensees. Question 10. If a property is in a special taxing district, the approved contract to buy and sell real estate provides A. Seller must pay off as this is an encumbrance to the property. B. Buyer will have 30 days after closing to petition to be excluded from the district. C. Buyer may terminate the contract by written notice. D. Seller can apply for a waiver of the taxes and the buyer won't have to pay them. The answer is C. Buyer may terminate the contract by written notice. Bonus question 1. Which of the following is not a true statement? A. The title company will insure the amount requested by the insured. B. The title company's liability is limited to actual damages. C. An insured can obtain a leasehold title insurance policy for a ground lease. D. The title company will insure for the value of improvements not yet constructed on the property. The answer is A. The title company will insure the amount requested by the insured. Question 11. According to the approved contract to buy and sell real estate, encumbrances to be paid by the seller. A. May be paid at or before closing. B. Must be satisfied prior to closing. C. May not be paid from proceeds of the sale. D. May be paid by the seller after closing. The answer is A, may be paid at or before closing. Question 11. Another associate broker in your office has listed a house you would like to buy as a rental investment property. What form or forms would you use to present your offer? A, the licensee buyout addendum. B, the residential contract to buy and sell. C, the residential contract to buy and sell and the licensee buyout addendum. D, the commercial contract to buy and sell. The answer is B, the residential contract to buy and sell. The only time the licensee buyout addendum must be used is when the licensee is buying her own listing. Question 12. If an offeree wishes to reject an offer and modify its terms in a return offer, the offeree should A, mark up the offer with any terms changed and send it back. B, have the broker prepare a counterproposal with amended terms. C, have the broker prepare an agreement to amend and extend contract with the new terms. D, have the broker tell the original offeror to submit a new offer with the desired terms. The answer is B, have the broker prepare a counterproposal with the amended terms. Question 13. The approved exclusive right to lease contracts. A, all established agency relationships. B, don't require disclosure of material facts. C, provide that the broker receive a lump sum commission based on contract rent. D, establish a broker's authority to offer a property for lease. The answer is D, establish a broker's authority to offer a property for lease. All listing agreements establish the broker's authority to represent the seller or buyer in the proposed transaction. Question 14. What is the purpose of the Colorado Real Estate License Law? A, protect licensed brokers in Colorado. B, establish fair real estate brokerage fees. C, permit real estate brokers to practice law. D, protect the public of the state of Colorado. Answer D, protect the public of the state of Colorado. Question 15. In a transaction with a listing broker and a buyer's agent broker, who holds the earnest money? A, listing broker. B, buyer's agent. C, must be in a neutral escrow account company. D, the brokers establish a joint escrow. Answer A, listing broker. Colorado rules and regulations require that, without any other written agreement to the contrary, the listing broker holds the earnest money. Bonus question 2. In order to be recorded, a deed must be in writing and must A, be signed by the grantee. B, state the actual purchase price. C, be acknowledged. D, be free of all liens. Answer, be acknowledged. Question 16. A buyer who wishes to remain anonymous until closing. A, cannot do this, it is illegal. B, must hire an attorney, outlaw, to be a straw man. C, must reveal his identity to a seller's agent. D, may legally do this by instructing the broker in the exclusive right to buy contract. The answer is D, may legally do this by instructing the broker in the exclusive right to buy contract. Question 17. If a property is sold for unpaid taxes, how long does the owner have to redeem? A. 90 days from the date of first notice of delinquency. B. Up to 3 years from the tax sale. C. 1 year from the tax sale. D. 6 months from the tax sale date for residential property. The answer is B. Up to 3 years from the tax sale. Question 18. Water rights in Colorado are A. Rural property transferred by deed. B. Appurtenant rural property. C. Appurtenant personal property. D. Rural property transferred by bill of sale. The answer is A. Rural property transferred by deed. Question 19. Colorado law provides a homestead exemption to a head of household. This exemption, A, protects the first $45,000 of assets from creditors unless the exemption is waived. B, applies only to debits secured by real estate. C, cannot be waived because it is automatic under the law. D, creates a dower right for a widow. B, applies only to debits secured by real estate. The homestead exemption protects the owner from debits secured by real estate up to $45,000. If there isn't $45,000 of equity in the home, the owner cannot be forced to sell it to pay off the debt. If there is more than $45,000 of equity, the homeowner gets the first $45,000. Question 19. What form of concurrent ownership does Colorado recognize? A. Tenancy by the entireties. B. Community property. C. Tenancy for years. D. Joint tenancy. The answer is D. Joint tenancy. Colorado also recognizes tenants in common. Question 20. Real estate professional errors and omissions insurance. A. Replace the real estate recovery fund. B. Protects licensees from loss based on their innocent mistakes. C. Has full coverage for license fraud. D. Is optional, but good business practice. The answer is B. Protects licensees from loss based on their innocent mistakes. However, E&O insurance does not protect the licensee from fraud, misrepresentation, and other felonious acts. Bonus question 3. The two parties to a lease contract are the A. Landlord and the serf. B. Rentor and the rentee. C. Lessor and the leasee. D. Grantor and the grantee. The answer is C. Lessor and the leasee. Question 21. According to the Commission-approved exclusive right to sell listing contract, A broker's compensation is set by the Real Estate Commission for certain geographical areas. B. A broker's compensation is set by local brokers as a standard fee. C. A broker's compensation is established by the seller. D. A broker's compensation is established by the brokerage firm. The answer is D. A broker's compensation is established by the brokerage firm. Question 22. An in-company transaction means one in which A. Broker has an agency listing and cooperating broker is a transaction broker. B. Broker is an agent for the seller and buyer is a customer. C. Broker is an agent for the buyer with no working relationship with seller. D. Broker represents or is working with both parties to the transaction. The answer is D. Broker represents or is working with both parties to the transaction. Question 23. 3 joint tenants sign a listing with your company. What is the minimum number of duplicate originals you need? A, 2, B, 1, C, 4, D, 5. The answer is C, 4. The broker is required to give a duplicate original of the signed agreement to each party in the agreement, and one additional for the brokerage firm's records. Question 24. What is true of a mechanic's lien? A. Has priority over all prior liens. B. Has priority over all tax liens. C. Can be placed by a supplier of materials. D. Can be retroactive to the date of completion. The answer is C. Can be placed by a supplier of materials. 25. A special tax or special assessment is shown on the certificate of taxes due in the amount of $834 for a curb and gutter project. The tax is payable over 10 years with an annual interest of 5%. If the buyer has agreed to assume the property obligation, how will it show on the settlement worksheet? A. It will not show up since it has no financial effect on the closing. B. 834 debit to the seller, 834 credit to the buyer. C. 834 debit to the seller, 834 credit to the broker. D. 834 plus prorated interest debit to the seller and credit to the buyer. Answer A. It will not show up since it has no financial effect on the closing. If the buyer assumes a special assessment, it is not reflected on the settlement worksheet. Bonus question 4. In a new loan closing, the settlement worksheet will show an entry for a tax reserve that indicates A. The new lender is collecting this tax amount from the seller. B. The new lender is deducting this amount as a loan transfer fee. C. The new lender is withholding this amount from loan proceeds to start the impound account for the next payment. D. The new lender is contributing this amount toward the buyer's taxes for this year. D. The new lender is contributing this amount toward the buyer's taxes for this year. An escrow of 1/12 of the annual taxes is taken by the lender in the monthly payment so that next year when the taxes come due, there is money to pay the taxes. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more Colorado real estate harder question videos for easy studying.